Welcome back everyone to theCUBE studios. I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE, here for a special presentation of theCUBE in the NYSE Wired Open Community connecting Wall Street and Silicon Valley with our studios here. Sharon Zhou here, founder and CEO of Lamini, and a startup we covered. She was on theCUBE in 2023 at a Databricks event. Sharon, great to have you back on theCUBE in studio, looking good, matching the CUBE colors.
That's right,
well done.
It here.
Welcome back. Well, first of all,
so
thanks
much.
for coming back.
Yeah, of course.
The world has changed a lot since we last talked, and look at just what Databricks has done, and just open table formats. That whole data layer is under massive transformation because the demand is for more AI, data value, the models are out there, you're starting to see, operating frameworks around distributed computing and ultimately Kubernetes and all the AI infrastructure. Everything is lining up.
That's right.
2 years ago, we were just trying to get people excited about retrieval augmentation generation or RAG. It's like now it's like, okay, everyone's doing that and there's a lot more behind the curtain. So what's the big update for Lamini?
Well, I think one really exciting thing, so we focus on developers, we're a developer platform to make these models not hallucinate, so not make up different facts. And we do so via what we call post-training techniques, so making it possible for developers everywhere to be able to steer these models on their own data via post-training techniques like fine-tuning or reinforcement learning, similar to kind of what DeepSeek has really popularized more recently. And this makes it so that these models don't make up facts on your, 10Ks financial statements, or within media, like names of people and what they do, but being able to do that across a huge number of facts is really, really important. And so we've been seeing, being able to steer these models to very high factual accuracy has enabled them to touch production.
When we talked a couple of years ago, what I was excited on that interview was RAG was not obvious, retrieval, augmentation, generation, but search was an instant value proposition. Steering models at data is an interesting concept because if you look at all the IP inside these large enterprises, their IP is their data, where it's originated, unstructured. SQL we know is great, but not everything's SQL, but SQL and beyond is where the value is. They're all trying to get value out of their data. And what DeepSeek taught us, and you mentioned them, is that they did some clever things in how they did techniques to get around some of the limitations of the hardware, granted different use case, but it points to a pattern, which is point your AI models at these data sets, which is a little bit not obvious. The old way was throw a bunch of NVIDIA at it and see what crank it out, versus much more of a thinking through. Am I getting that right? Is that kind of where people's heads are at right now in terms of how to think about these models? So it's not just throw one model at it, maybe think about what my data is about. Obviously, privacy issues and not putting it into the public cloud. Is that the market right now? Is that this current situation?
Well, to get better intelligence, so to make your model be able to operate effectively on your domain, you effectively need two ingredients. One is compute, so NVIDIA, AMD GPUs, plus that data. And that data, these pre-trained models, whether it be DeepSeek or OpenAI's GPT models or Anthropic's Claude models, they're trained on the internet. So they're trained on this very general corpus of data, but they're not trained on your private data inside an enterprise. And so if you want that model to very deeply understand, reason with that private data, you can additionally train it on your private data and get that data into the model. And this is especially helpful and doable with smaller models from like a cost perspective and just time to iteration time perspective. So being able to do that with open source models like DeepSeek has been a very attractive approach we've seen for many enterprises to get these models, open source models, smaller models, to be domain experts effectively.
Is there a technique or model that's best appropriate that you're seeing for certain use cases? I've heard Mistral's great for this thing, or maybe use this Anthropic for this. Are there patterns to the differentiation of the models? If you, I don't know how do I describe it, but like, is there a model that fits certain things, certain data sets, or on-premise AI factories, for example? I'm just kind of figuring out how do I know what to do with which model?
Of course, that's always a very big challenge because which models are available changes every week because there are new models coming out constantly. The thing I often suggest is build your system with a model agnostic approach. So be able to swap models very quickly because there will be new models coming out all the time, and be able to design and architect your system in a way so that you can actually have that flexibility and experimentation capability. And so kind of what we do is we suggest, hey, these are a few models that you can start off with, and then test it on your data, because once you test it on your data and you train it to actually understand your data, sometimes the underlying model doesn't matter as much because the model starts to learn about your data much more specifically. And therefore, whether it's DeepSeek, Mistral, or Llama underneath, when it's an open source model, it doesn't actually really change it as long as it's within the same generation.
And the data is the customer's data is the key.
Yeah.
Talk about what's going on with the company. How do you guys engage customers? What's the business model? Take us through a little bit of the mechanics of how you engage with the market.
Yeah, so we sell a software license for developer teams inside enterprises, such as like a Colgate, for example, to be able to tune their models, edit these models, usually open source models, to be able to learn about facts on their data. One specific use case that has been taking off is Texas SQL, so Business Intelligence Agent, which you can imagine is a few people in the company, whether it be like 30 or 200 people, can write these SQL queries in an advanced way and really deeply understand the data and deeply understand the queries and deeply understand, the calculations underlying share of market analysis, for example. But to enable far more people, for example, across sales, marketing, supply chain, operations, to be able to make data-driven decisions, you need more people to be able to query that highly structured data, for example, in your Snowflake or Databricks warehouse, and so, or Lakehouse, excuse me. And so enabling more people to write SQL queries through natural language is one really high value application that we've seen across the enterprise.
So the Agent Summit, the AI Agent Summit that Simon and community put together, a bunch of, I would say, insiders, smart people making things happen like yourselves, are having to kind of deal with the trend, which is accelerated change, new models every day. What's going on? What's the latest? Vibe coding is hot. We were talking about that before we came on theCUBE. What's that about?
So vibe coding is really exciting. It's kind of like enabling more people to be able to write code through what we call vibes, or a slightly lazy approach to prompting and getting the model to write that code for you and do the heavy lifting. I'm excited about this trend kind of taking off into other areas. For example, even vibe training models, right? Like extending it even further, and maybe we're not just writing general code, we're actually editing the model itself, changing the model's training data, and having the model actually change that on its own, but through human vibes, like human feedback, essentially. So I'm really excited about that as a trend, essentially getting an agent to modify another agent and improve another agent over time. So that's essentially what that is. And something that's been really exciting internally that I've started to see is our designer, Nina, she has been able to vibe tune some of these models to get them to learn facts about the TV show Severance and to make that very effective. And so I just find that really exciting to see more people be able to have access to this tooling and to be able to have the ability to steer this really magical technology.
And you think about vibe coding, to me it's like software always used to be like a mechanism, like it's like static, or it's not like an organism. Like we're humans, we vibe out, right? We have vibes. Software now vibing kind of can bring in kind of a whole nother level of intelligence that's evolving, like humans, species.
Right.
It's, so it's the difference between like algae versus like some, species that swims in the ocean, so to speak. Like this is not, software is evolving. So is Vibe a gateway towards a more intelligent software layer? I mean, that could be software changing software in a good way. I mean, it's got to be programmed, but I think this might be the beginning of something like that's going to be ongoing, because the messy middle between data and insights or value is going to be these agent layers. Multiple agents, people are already admitting and seeing. Sub agents, master agents, big, all kinds of different configurations, mixture of experts.
Right.
All these things are happening.
I mean, I find agents really exciting because I feel like, and I was initially a little bit of a skeptic, having been, an AI researcher, an expert in this space. I have almost a model-centric view of the world. But what I realized was agents was a more human-centric view of the model, of LLMs more broadly, because an agent is kind of like a virtual human who can call an LLM, call multiple LLMs, have multiple prompts to the same LLM, what have you, but take actions as if it were a person. And it almost extends the Turing test, I think. It extends it to, okay, can this agent, can this model or set of models or calls to the models actually be able to deliver us economic value? And there's really exciting work such as Sui Lancer. For example, it's a benchmark, I think, from OpenAI or the like, but essentially looking at, hey, can we actually get an agent to be able to complete tasks up to $1 million on freelance sites, such as Upwork, for example. And that shows, oh, this can actually deliver economic value, right, and do work that we can attach to some number, some dollar value. And that can get towards, I think, what Satya often says is, you know, how valuable is generative AI really? How can we measure that in GDP growth, right? And so I think it's extending the Turing test towards, okay, how much work productivity can we get out of these agents?
I mean, the economic impact is phenomenal. We were talking before we came on, mixture of experts, and that you have a new term that you guys are talking about called mixture of memory experts.
That's right.
Or mommy.
Or mommy.
Mommy
yes,
models.
Pronounced mommy.
I love mixture of experts because it kind of, you know, people can relate to that. Okay, a bunch of experts available at will.
In a sub-team of them responding at a time.
And we had folks on at the conference. You're going to hear from folks who are doing stuff in healthcare. Phenomenal work, a little bit of Matrix Minority Report kind of vibe going on there, where a throughput on operations is so much better in healthcare. So you're starting to see the efficiency translate into economics. So I think that's going to be a big piece. But I think still people like in the enterprise are trying to figure out, okay, I get it, but how do I get from point A to point B? Connect some first dots for me. And that is like, how do I configure models? How should I view models? So if you had to create a digital twin of yourself in an enterprise, how would you be orchestrating the teams to think about models? I mean, what's that model-centric view, and what Kool-Aid would you be passing out inside the enterprise?
Well, maybe I'll start with the biggest mistake I've been seeing. So I think, and that I think people can very much overcome. It's that it takes a lot of experimentation and iteration to get AI to work effectively. And what I mean by that is people often view, oh, I got this model, or GPT-4 is this model, one model, and that's one model. Maybe I'll get my one model on, you know, finance, for example. It's actually not just one model. In order to get to that one model, GPT-4 was rumored to have 20,000 runs, right, to get to that model. So it's not just about that one model. It's really figuring out, like, how do I build out architecture and architect a system that can handle many models at a time? Because when I'm iterating, there are so many more things that are happening, right? There's so many more actual models going on. And so I would think about it from an iterative perspective and an experimentation perspective to find the right answer.
Sharon, I love the way you think about models, because I think we're going to start to see the world where it's not about having a bunch of models, it's one holistic thing. What's your view on model integration? Because I love the vibe coding, that points to evolution like species. Models can talk to each other. They're going to cross-pollinate maybe. Do you see a world where models have relationships with each other and have reason about each other, where we don't have to worry about which model is what? There's almost an abstraction layer of orchestration or an agent for the models. I mean, isn't that something that is obvious, or am I overthinking it?
No, you're not overthinking it. I think there are two ways to kind of think about that. One is, I think the model itself doesn't need to be this monolith, right? If you take the mixture of experts idea, and we do this a bit with Mommy, but if you take it to the extreme, then essentially it's a bunch of little experts. There are billions of experts in the mixture, right? Not just a few. And basically any subset of this giant model, this giant brain, is, you could argue, a different model, and that's all unified under this one big team, this one big mixture. And then the other lens through which I could respond to kind of what you've posed here is a layer across kind of this agent layer across all these different models and really making it agnostic to work with these different models. And I think a lot of people have taken excellent approaches towards this, creating that agnostic layer. And certainly internally at these companies, people are creating those model agnostic layers because they want to be able to play with all the possible models.
It's funny, we use words like connective tissue all the time in tech. Like, what's the connective tissue? But in a way, what you're getting at is that you can have a bunch of zillion of experts. The connective tissue is software? Is it like, I mean, what is the connective tissue if this is the model? Is it a runtime? It's an interesting question because I'm trying to figure out, okay, if I want to deploy models, I'd love to have a turnkey. Here's my stockpile of experts that I've verified. Now go run on something.
Right, exactly. And I think that can happen within the model itself, and it can learn to dynamically choose for you what sub-team of experts will help answer your question the best under the constraint of, you know, what you have access to. So maybe certain experts, they learned from a data set that's private and you don't have access to it, then you can't access those experts, right? So.
Well, Sharon, great to have you on theCUBE. Thanks for coming in the studio. Great to see you again. And again, congratulations on the success. The market's spun in your direction. I'm sure you're feeding on all the AI goodness coming in.
So good.
You're speaking at the AI Agent Conference in New York. What's the topic of your talk? What are you going to be, what's your narrative? What's your talk track?
Of course it's about agents and kind of what they do, what they are. I think a lot of people are confused about the definition of them. I really think it's this kind of virtual human-centered view where, you know, this agent has long-term memory understanding of things, and it can take actions and reflect on them, similar to a person. And yeah, I'm seeing how we use agents internally to help with creating training data for these models. So sharing kind of our perspectives on that and stories about that is what I'm going to talk about.
Well, put a plug in for Lamini. What are you working on? You hiring? What's going on with the company? Give a plug.
I think try Mommy out because Mommy knows best.
Mommy is the mixture of memory experts.
That's right.
Is that
that's right. And there might be Grandmommy coming up with reinforcement learning.
So is Grandmommy an experienced, slower model, or is it a
You're
more?
Right. We did not consider that.
No, but no, experience and efficiency.
You're right. Maybe
okay, with age you get more efficient.
That's right. So maybe more reasoning.
A grand meaning grander.
You're right. You're right.
I'm getting, I'm experienced, a little slower, more efficient than the fast young models.
Yes, to get to wisdom.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks
Great to see you. Congratulations. Sharon Zhou's in the center of all the action. Again, starting in 2023 in theCUBE, we're tracking the trends. Just in 2 years, so much has happened. The next 2 will be phenomenal. Again, mixture of experts, mixture of memory experts. Again, this is all converging into one big model, all written in software. Obviously the AI infrastructure is booming, and of course agents will come out of this in the thousands and millions. This is theCUBE, bringing you all the technology coverage here. Thanks for watching.